position is no longer available, Mr. Reynolds. Unfortunately, plans have changed. I felt like someone had just sucker punched me in the gut. The HR director's face on my laptop screen showed about as much emotion as a brick wall as she delivered the news that would turn my family's life upside down. Jessica Walsh had probably practiced this speech in the mirror, but she clearly hadn't practiced caring about the man on the receiving end. My name is Michael Reynolds. I'm 49 years old, and exactly 4 days after moving my entire family 200 miles across the country, for what I thought was the opportunity of a lifetime, my job vanished with a single sentence. I was sitting in our half-unpacked rental house in North Carolina, surrounded by boxes labeled in Jennifer's neat handwriting, kitchen, Daniel's room, Sarah's books. The irony wasn't lost on me that the woman destroying my career was sitting in a comfortable office while I was surrounded by the chaos of a move I'd convinced my family to make. "I don't understand," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I signed a contract. We sold our house in Portland. My wife sold her physical therapy practice. We enrolled our kids in schools here." Jessica cleared her throat like she was about to read a grocery list. "Helix Dynamics has undergone some restructuring decisions. The integration team is being downsized before it's even formed. Legal says we can terminate within the probationary period. You'll receive 2 weeks severance as a courtesy. 2 weeks of salary as a courtesy after we'd blown up our entire lives to move from Oregon to North Carolina for them. Can I speak with Ryan?" I asked, referring to the CTO who'd recruited me. Ryan Martinez had spent 3 months convincing me that my 22 years of experience in healthcare data integration was exactly what they needed for their expanding medical records division. "Ryan is no longer with the company," she said, flat as day-old beer. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about me. This was a company in freefall, cutting costs wherever they could. I was collateral damage in someone else's bad financial planning. I should have stood up for myself right then, should have demanded proper compensation or threatened legal action, but shock does weird things to your brain. Instead, I actually thanked her for letting me know. I wished her well and disconnected the call. How was I going to tell Jennifer? My wife had built her physical therapy practice over 12 years. She had loyal patients, great staff, a solid reputation in the community. All because I'd convinced her that this opportunity at Helix was worth leaving everything behind. And our kids, Daniel was 15 and already hated me for making him leave his friends before sophomore year. The kid had a real shot at an athletic scholarship, and I just yanked him away from coaches who knew his potential. Sarah was 8 and struggling with dyscalculia, a learning disability that had taken us 2 years to get properly diagnosed and accommodated at her old school. The private school here in Raleigh had promised they had resources for her. The tuition deposit alone was $3,800, non-refundable. I sat there running numbers. Our savings would cover maybe 3 months if we were careful. The housing market in Portland had exploded after we sold. We couldn't afford to go back even if we wanted to. When I told them what happened, Jennifer just sat down heavily on one of our unpacked boxes. Daniel kicked the wall hard enough to leave a dent we'd never get our security deposit back for. Sarah crawled into my lap and asked if this meant we could go home. I didn't have the heart to tell her we didn't have a home to go back to. The next morning, I started what would become the most humbling 6 weeks of my professional life. I updated my LinkedIn profile, sent emails to my network, and started applying for jobs. The responses came back quickly, but not the ones I wanted to hear. The first interview was with a healthcare tech company in Charlotte. The hiring manager was maybe 32 years old, wearing sneakers to what I'd considered a formal interview. "So you've been doing this for..." "Wow, 22 years, he said, scrolling through my resume on his tablet. "That's like before cloud computing was really a thing, right?" I explained my experience with cloud migrations, modern security protocols, HIPAA compliance frameworks. He nodded politely, but I could see in his eyes that he'd already written me off as a dinosaur. "We'll be in touch," he said. 3 days later, I got the standard rejection email. "We've decided to go with a candidate whose skills more closely align with our current technology stack." The second interview was worse. The CTO, who looked young enough to be my son, actually asked me if I was familiar with newer technologies like APIs and microservices. I'd been architecting API integration since before he graduated high school, but pointing that out seemed like it would only make things worse. "We're looking for someone who can move fast and adapt quickly," he said. "Sometimes experience can make people set in their ways. Translation, you're too old." The third interview never happened. I got a call 2 hours before I was supposed to drive to Raleigh. "We've decided to promote someone internally," the HR person said, "but we'll keep your resume on file." That's when I started noticing the pattern. Every job posting said they wanted 5 to 10 years of experience. Anything more than that and you were overqualified. It was code for too expensive and too old. Jennifer found part-time work at a rehab center, barely enough to cover groceries. Daniel stopped talking to me entirely. Sarah's new school called about adjustment concerns. Every rejection felt like another nail in the coffin of not just my career, but my family's stability. 3 weeks into this nightmare, I was sitting in my car outside a Starbucks, having just finished another interview that I knew had gone nowhere. My phone rang. The caller ID showed a North Carolina number I didn't recognize. Is this Michael Reynolds? A man's voice tense and tired. Yes. Who's calling? Stephen Foster, CEO of Helix Dynamics. My heart started pounding. Mr. Foster, what can I do for you? I've just learned about your situation, the termination of your contract. He sounded genuinely uncomfortable. I want to personally apologize. This should never have happened. I appreciate that, I said, not giving him anything. The fact is, Mr. Reynolds, we're in a difficult position. The Metacore project is 6 weeks behind schedule. The client is threatening to pull out entirely. Our interim integration director doesn't understand the proprietary architecture, and the documentation is insufficient. I almost laughed. I knew exactly what he was talking about. Ryan and I had discussed the Metacore project extensively during my interviews. It was a $25 million contract to migrate a regional hospital network's patient data to Helix's platform. It was also the main reason they'd recruited me. I'd done similar migrations 3 times before, and I'd specifically warned Ryan about potential architectural conflicts during the interview process. That sounds challenging, I said, keeping my voice neutral. We'd like to bring you on as a consultant to help navigate this situation. Premium rates, of course. Triple your original salary prorated for the 8-week project duration. Now I did laugh. A short, sharp sound that made him pause. Mr. Foster, 4 weeks ago, your company left my family financially devastated. My 15-year-old son isn't speaking to me. My 8-year-old daughter cries herself to sleep. My wife gave up a 12-year practice, and now you want me to bail you out of a crisis I specifically warned your team about during my interviews. Silence on the line. I understand your frustration. No, you don't. I cut in, but thank you for the offer. I wish you the best of luck with Metacore. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were actually shaking. When I got home, Jennifer was at the kitchen table with her laptop, scrolling through job listings. She looked up when I walked in. How did it go today? Same as always. They want someone younger. I sat down across from her. Oh, and Helix called. They want me to come back as a consultant to fix their Metacore mess. Her eyes widened. What did you tell them? I told them no. Mike, she said quietly, we're down to 6 weeks of savings. The mortgage alone is $3,200 a month. Daniel's going to need new equipment for track. Sarah's tutoring is $400 a week. We can't afford to turn down money right now. She was right, and we both knew it. But something had hardened inside me during that call. A line had been drawn. I'm not helping them, I said. Not after what they did. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept running numbers, scenarios, possibilities. By 3 a.m., I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop, researching business registration requirements in North Carolina. The next morning, I had a meeting scheduled with Anthony Parker at Apex Health Systems, Helix's biggest competitor. It was my last decent prospect after 6 weeks of searching. Anthony was sharp, mid-40s, clearly knew the industry inside and out. He'd done his homework on my background. I heard what happened at Helix, he said after we'd covered the basics. Their loss, frankly. We've been watching their struggles with Metacore. Couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of people. The interview went well. He asked technical questions that actually demonstrated he understood what he was hiring for. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was talking to someone who valued experience over energy. The position is senior manager level, he said. I know that's a step down from what Helix promised, but the compensation is competitive and there's real growth potential here. It was 15% less than Helix had offered, but 30% more than any other opportunity I'd found. I should have accepted on the spot. Instead, I took a deep breath and stepped off a cliff. Actually, I'm considering starting my own consultancy, I said. Would Apex be open to contracting with an independent firm rather than hiring me directly? Anthony studied me for a long moment. That's interesting. What services would this firm provide? Specialized integration of healthcare data systems, migration management, compliance oversight. The same expertise you'd be hiring me for. but with more flexibility for both parties. And this firm exists. As of this morning, I slid a business card across the table, Nexus Integration Solutions. I'd printed them at Kinko's an hour before the meeting. It was the biggest gamble of my life. No steady paycheck, no benefits, no safety net. Just me, 22 years of experience, and a belief that I was worth more than the job market was telling me. Anthony picked up the card, turning it over in his hands. Bold move, Michael. Very bold. It's either bold or completely insane, I admitted. I haven't decided which yet. He actually smiled at that. In this industry, sometimes they're the same thing. Let me talk to my team. A consultancy arrangement might solve several problems for us, especially given the current instability at Helix. As I drove home, my phone started ringing. Stephen Foster again. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. The fourth time I answered, "Mr. Reynolds, please reconsider. The Medicor situation is deteriorating rapidly. We're prepared to offer you a permanent position, director level, with a significant signing bonus to compensate for the disruption to your family." "Mr. Foster," I said, pulling into a parking lot, "I'm no longer available for employment offers. However, my consultancy, Nexus Integration Solutions, might be able to assist you. Our standard rate for crisis intervention is $275 per hour, with a minimum commitment of 200 hours. The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. That's more than double what we were offering for the permanent position." "Yes," I agreed. "It is, and I require 50% of the minimum upfront, non-refundable. If you're interested, I can have a contract to you this afternoon. If not, I understand completely. This feels punitive, Mr. Reynolds." "Not at all," I said, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. "This is simply the market rate for solving a problem that your company created. My consultancy has overhead. My family has expenses. You're welcome to explore other solutions if this doesn't work for you." I hung up and sat in my car, heart hammering. Had I just thrown away our last chance at financial recovery? Or had I finally found a way to take back control? My phone buzzed with an email notification. "Stephen Foster, we accept your terms. Contract needed ASAP. Medicor executives arriving Monday for review." I stared at the screen, barely believing what I was reading. They'd actually agreed $275 an hour, 200-hour minimum. That was $55,000 for 8 weeks of work, assuming it didn't run over. When I walked through our front door, Jennifer was waiting in the hallway, her face tight with worry. "Well," she asked. "I just started my own company," I said. "And I think I just landed my first client." Jennifer stared at me like I'd just announced I was joining the circus. "You started a company?" "Mike, we can't afford for you to be unemployed, let alone—" "I'm not unemployed," I interrupted, showing her the email on my phone. "Helix just agreed to pay me $275 an hour to fix their Medicor mess. Minimum 200 hours, half up front." She read the email twice, her expression shifting from panic to disbelief. "They're actually going to pay you $55,000 to solve the problem they created by firing you. That's the plan." I sat down next to her. "And Anthony at Apex is interested in a consulting arrangement too. This could work, Jen, or it could be a complete disaster," she said, but I could hear hope creeping into her voice. That weekend, I spent 18 hours setting up Nexus Integration Solutions properly. Business license, liability insurance, basic website, contract templates. Jennifer helped me review the legal language, drawing on her experience dealing with patient liability waivers. Monday morning, I dialed into the Helix emergency meeting about Medicor. It felt surreal, being back in virtual meetings with people who'd tossed me aside 6 weeks earlier. "Michael, thank God you're here," said Nicholas Kumar, the interim director they'd promoted to replace me. Poor guy was clearly in over his head. "We've been trying to understand the integration pathway, but the documentation is incomplete." "I can see that," I said, reviewing the disaster they'd created in my absence. "The fundamental issue is that your architecture assumes a linear patient data model, but Medicor uses a network model with branching relational elements. That's not what our analysis showed." Nicholas stammered. "Your analysis missed key structural elements in their legacy system." I said, not unkindly, but firmly. "I've outlined the necessary adjustments here." I shared my screen, showing the revised architecture I'd spent Sunday developing. The silence on the call was deafening as they absorbed what I'd presented. "This will require rebuilding half the integration layer," one engineer finally said. "Yes," I agreed, "but it's the only way to make the migration work within Medicor's timeline." How did you identify this so quickly? Nicholas asked, and I could hear the frustration in his voice. Experience, I said simply. What I didn't say was that I'd spotted this exact issue during my interviews with Ryan months ago. I'd flagged it as a potential concern. No one had listened. That Thursday, I met with Anthony's team at Apex. The contrast with Helix was night and day. Where Helix was panicking about a crisis they'd created, Apex was methodically planning their next phase of growth. We've been watching Helix's struggles with interest, Anthony said as we reviewed their expansion plans. Their problems create opportunities for us, especially if we can demonstrate superior integration capabilities. I spent the next hour outlining a strategy that would position Apex to capture clients frustrated with Helix's service disruptions. Nothing unethical, just better execution and more reliable delivery. This is exactly the kind of thinking we need, said Rebecca Martinez, their VP of Business Development. Can you put together a comprehensive proposal? Absolutely. My rate for strategic consulting is $225 per hour, and I'd estimate 40 hours for a complete market positioning analysis. They didn't even blink at the price. By the end of the meeting, I had my second client. For the next 8 weeks, I was working harder than I'd ever worked in my life, but it was different. Every hour I billed was mine. Every solution I developed was building my reputation, not someone else's. When Helix called at 7 p.m. with a crisis, I answered because I chose to, not because I was afraid of getting fired. The Metacore project was a success. The integration went live on schedule, the data migration was flawless, and their executives were thrilled. More importantly, word got around the industry. Michael Reynolds was the guy who could fix impossible problems. My phone started ringing. A hospital system in Charlotte needed help with a compliance audit. A medical device company in Virginia wanted to migrate their customer data to a new platform. A health insurance provider in Florida was struggling with claims processing integration. Jennifer's practice was coming together too. She'd found a perfect location in a medical complex, and her old patients were already calling to schedule appointments when she opened. Daniel had made friends on the track team and was talking about colleges with good engineering programs. Sarah was thriving at her new school, finally getting the support she needed. 6 months after that devastating phone call from Jessica Walsh, I was sitting in my home office reviewing contracts for my 6th client when my phone rang. Stephen Foster again? Michael, I hope you're well, he said, sounding tired. I'm doing fine, Stephen. What can I do for you? I wanted to give you a heads up. I'm leaving Helix. The board asked me to step down. I kept my voice neutral. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be. The company's been mismanaged for years. What happened to you was just one symptom of bigger problems. He paused. The new interim CEO wants to discuss something with you. Would you be open to a meeting? Depends on what they want to discuss. I think they want to offer you Ryan's old position, CTO level, significant equity package. They recognize that letting you go was a mistake. The irony was perfect. Stephen, I appreciate the heads up, but I'm not interested in being anyone's employee again. Nexus is profitable and growing. They're prepared to discuss an acquisition. Full valuation of your company, plus a leadership contract. I almost laughed. They want to buy the company they accidentally created when they fired me. Essentially, yes. He had the grace to sound embarrassed. Tell them thanks, but no thanks. Nexus isn't for sale. After I hung up, I walked downstairs to find Jennifer making dinner while Daniel and Sarah did homework at the kitchen table. 6 months ago, we'd been eating mac and cheese because it was all we could afford. Tonight, Jennifer was making salmon, and we were talking about vacation plans for the summer. Who was that? Jennifer asked. Helix. They want to hire me back. Actually, they want to buy the company. Daniel looked up from his calculus homework. Are you going to do it? Not a chance, I said. We built this ourselves. Nobody gets to take it away from us again. Good, he said, and went back to his homework. It was the first time in months he'd expressed approval of anything I'd done. That night, as I was closing my laptop after reviewing the day's accomplishments, I realized something had fundamentally changed. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about building something that couldn't be taken away. 10 months later, I was sitting in a conference room overlooking downtown Raleigh, looking across the table at 3 executives from Helix Dynamics. Not as their employee this time, but as their potential savior. Nexus Integration Solutions now had 6 full-time employees, all specialists I'd worked with over the years who were tired of corporate politics and wanted to work somewhere that valued their expertise. We had contracts with 8 major healthcare systems across the Southeast. Our revenue for the year was projected at $1.8 million. More importantly, we'd built something that couldn't be taken away with a single phone call. The interim CEO, Patricia Williams, was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s. She'd been brought in to clean up the mess that Stephen Foster had left behind. "Mr. Reynolds, I'll be direct," she said. "Helix is in trouble. We've lost 3 major clients in the past 6 months, including Medicor. Our integration team is completely dysfunctional. We need help," I nodded. "I've heard. What exactly are you proposing?" "A partnership. Helix has the client relationships and the infrastructure. You have the expertise and execution capability that we clearly lack. We're proposing a joint venture where Nexus handles all integration projects for our clients, with revenue sharing." It was a generous offer, probably more generous than they could afford. But there was something about sitting in that boardroom, being courted by the same company that had discarded me like yesterday's newspaper, that crystallized everything I'd learned over the past year. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but Nexus operates on a different principle. We work with clients who value our expertise enough to pay for it appropriately. When clients treat us as a disposable commodity, we find better clients." Patricia leaned forward. "I understand you have reasons to be skeptical of Helix. What happened to you was inexcusable, but I'm offering you a chance to build something much bigger than what you have now." "What I have now," I said, "is a company that my family's financial security doesn't depend on anyone else's whims. What I have is a team that respects each other and delivers exceptional work. What I have is the ability to say no to clients who don't align with our values." I stood up, gathering my materials. "Thank you for the meeting, but Nexus isn't interested in partnerships with companies that view people as interchangeable resources." Walking to my car, I felt a sense of completion that I hadn't expected. This wasn't the angry satisfaction of telling someone off. This was the quiet confidence that comes from building something valuable and protecting it. My phone rang as I was driving home. Anthony Parker from Apex. "Michael, I just got an interesting call," he said. "Patricia Williams from Helix reached out about potentially acquiring our integration consulting contract from you. Apparently, they're willing to pay a premium." I smiled. "And what did you tell them?" "I told them that we're very happy with Nexus and have no intention of switching providers. But it got me thinking, we're looking at expanding into the Virginia market next year. Would you be interested in opening a satellite office there? Send me the details. We'll talk." This was how business grew when you focused on delivering value instead of just surviving. Satisfied clients recommend you to other clients. Your reputation becomes your best marketing tool. Your expertise becomes more valuable over time, not less. That evening, I was working in my home office when Daniel knocked on the door. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course. What's up?" He sat down in the chair across from my desk, suddenly looking older than his 16 years. "When Helix fired you, I was really angry. Not just at them, but at you for making us move here in the first place." I nodded. We'd never really talked about those first few months. "But watching you build Nexus, seeing how you handled everything, I get it now. Sometimes bad things happen that aren't fair, but you can choose how you respond." "That's very true," I said. "What made you think about this?" "I'm writing my college application essays. One of the prompts is about overcoming challenges. I wanted to write about watching you start your company. I felt something catch in my throat." "You want to write about me? About us? About how our family dealt with getting knocked down and found a way to build something better?" He grinned. "Plus, it's a good story. Starts with corporate betrayal, ends with entrepreneurial success. Admissions offices love that stuff." That weekend, Jennifer and I took the kids to tour Duke University. Daniel was interested in their biomedical engineering program. As we walked across the campus, Sarah ran ahead to look at the chapel, while Daniel peppered the tour guide with questions about research opportunities. Hard to believe a year ago we were eating mac and cheese and wondering if we'd have to pull him out of private school. Jennifer said, "Different world now," I agreed. "Better world. Do you ever regret not taking the job with Apex when they offered it? The steady salary, the benefits. I thought about it. No. What we built is ours. Nobody can take it away from us." My phone buzzed with a text from one of my former colleagues at my old job in Portland. "Saw the article about Nexus in Healthcare IT News. Impressive growth. Helix is trying to poach some of our team to rebuild their integration division." Thought you'd find that amusing. I showed the text to Jennifer, who laughed. They're still trying to solve the problem they created by firing you. Their problem to solve, I said. We're busy building our own future. That night, as I was reviewing proposals for 2 new client projects, I realized something had shifted in how I thought about what happened with Helix. It wasn't the worst thing that had ever happened to me anymore. It was the catalyst that forced me to build something I never would have attempted otherwise. The company that thought I was disposable had accidentally created their most formidable competitor. The job they'd taken from me had forced me to create something far more valuable than any position they could have offered. The security they'd stolen from my family had been replaced by something no one could ever take away. That wasn't revenge. That was justice. And justice, I discovered, tastes a whole lot sweeter than revenge ever could. Sometimes the greatest gift your enemies give you is forcing you to discover capabilities you never knew you had. When they push you off the corporate ladder, you might just find you were meant to build your own. At 49, I learned that being overqualified and too experienced aren't weaknesses in a world that worships youth. They're competitive advantages that only come with time, and they're exactly what clients will pay premium rates to access.